Hello and welcome back to Tuesday MLB DFS Slate Breakdown. It is May 21st. We're going to be going over today's slate, but before we do that, we will go over yesterday's, the perfect lineups, the winning lineups, then jump into today's pitchers and stacks to consider. Looks like it is going to be a very fun slate, a ton of hitting weather across the board, so it's going to be an interesting one. Might be a little hard to find some pitchers to like, but a lot to like in the hitting department, which really does make these slates a little bit more fun as a whole. So before we get into it, I do want to bring your attention to our app stores. If you just search LineStar DFS or LineStar app, it's going to pop up, and we do have a free 7-day trial on either iOS or Android app store. So go through that if you want to give us a try and you haven't yet. You do get the app and the website with your subscription, along with every sport we cover, all the tools, all the DFS, all the prop. It's a great value. Now let's get into this slate. So jumping on over to FanDuel to go over that first. And let's take a look here. So we got Yoshi Yamamoto, who had a great game, and then a bunch of one-offs. It was a pretty wild slate yesterday. The Angels did have a great game, and Houston kind of got there. The Royals kind of got there. Washington went nuts. Kind of surprised more Washington guys aren't popping up here with them putting up, what I think it was 12 runs. All in all, it was a nice little slate here, and 305.8 total. Now, the winning lineup did go to Yamamoto, and then Shohei, Freeman, Dodger stack, along with a two-man Houston stack, and then one-offs. Who's this? Got it done. 25K, so congrats to you, and let's check out the DK lineup. So on DraftKings, we had Ryan Weathers, Tanner Huck, a two-man Angel stack, and then one-offs. 43.3 salary used, 236.1 was the perfect lineup score, and then the winning lineup went to TJ with 196.25. They won by a little over 3 points here, and had Stroman and Bradley, who Bradley looked like he was just going to absolutely crush this slate. And then he gave up 5 runs out of nowhere after just absolutely being unhittable. The lineup went to the good old 5-2-1 lineup construction that literally won every day last week, and it's starting this week off strong too. It didn't win yesterday, but it did win. It didn't win Sunday, but it did win last night with a 5-man Angels, 2-man Houston, 1 Milwaukee with Christian Yelich. Congrats to TJ. You won 50K. And let's dive into today's slate. So, as this is loading, let's talk about a couple things here. First of all, Atlanta and Chicago. We have an 11-game total. It's warm in Chicago. The winds are just blowing out super hard. It's, mid-80s, 25-mile-an-hour winds blowing out. So that's definitely going to be a spot that we're interested in. Then in KC, we got winds blowing out there too, and warm weather. Baltimore, St. Louis, we have weather that we do need to watch there. Does a storm comes in later in the game? That storm, if it comes in early enough, could end the game. I think that there's going to be 2 ways we go about this game. Either they start the game and try and get it through before that storm comes in, or they see the writing on the wall and just postpone it. I would also put in another aspect where maybe they move the game up a little bit and just try to get it done before that storm comes through. Either way, there is definitely a game-ending storm it looks like will be coming through in the afternoon in St. Louis. Just depends if it comes in early enough. That same storm is coming through Kansas City too, but I think Kansas City is going to be able to get at least into the later innings in this one. So it's kind of a rundown. There's definitely some winds blowing out that are going to factor this, and let's get into pitching. So Clark Schmidt, 8,400 on DraftKings, coming in at 30% owned. He clearly looks like the top option with most situations. 8.25 consensus at only 8,400 is definitely getting a lot of attention here. But I don't think he should be the highest owned pitcher on this slate. I do think he's in a very good spot. He's been pitching great, 3.45 FIP. Over 2 ERA over his last 5 starts. Now, I want to bring this up because he is definitely pitching a little bit better than he is. He's getting a little lucky. Definitely could have some regression coming his way. He's allowing 44% fly balls, a decent amount of barrel balls, not a ton of ground balls, but at least he's limiting hard contact with only a 20% hard contact rate. Now, in the Mariners, they hit the ball hard. However, they only have a 302 WOBA, so you can definitely get over on the Mariners, especially with their almost 26% K rate versus righties. In this spot, I could literally see going either way. Not only is Clark Schmidt due for some regression, Seattle can put up fantasy points. You also have the leverage fact of Clark Schmidt going to be one of the highest owned pitchers. So I don't mind stacking some Mariners. I also like using Clark Schmidt, and it's a spot that I kind of like playing both sides a little bit. Next, you say Kikuchi. Now, personally, I think this is the clear top play on the slate. However, ownership isn't quite there. He's going at 24% versus Schmidt's 30%. So I definitely like Kikuchi. 2.79 FIP over his last 20, 2.96 over his last 5. He has a 27% K rate over his last 20, and it's down to 21.5 over the last 5. But who has he faced? KC, Dodgers, Washington, Minnesota, Baltimore, all good offenses that don't strike out a ton. So I'm not that surprised that that K rate over the last 5 is a little lower than we would expect. Chicago White Sox offense, 245 WOBA versus lefties, 0.99 ISO, strikes out almost 23%. I love this spot for Kikuchi, and I'm going to be all over it. I do have to bring in the one piece of information going against Kikuchi. Well, 2, I guess. 1, he's allowing a decent amount of barrel balls, very little soft contact, 30% hard contact isn't great. The other thing, 50 plate attempts, they're hitting 294 off him, 227 ISO. Now, Kikuchi has always been a guy that has been a little bit inconsistent, can absolutely get bombed. I love picking on him at times, but from what we've seen lately, he's been crushing. And if you look at what he's done versus White Sox, yeah, he had 1 game, 5 innings, 76 pitches, 4 innings, or 4 earned runs, 4 Ks. But he also has 5.2 innings, 8 Ks, no earned runs. 5.2 innings, 6 Ks, 1 earned run. I think he can absolutely get to him. I'm not that worried about the Chicago White Sox lineup, and he is my clear top play. Next, we got Charlie Morton. All right. This game is one we really do have to dissect. I think a ton of ownership is going to be here for good reason. Charlie Morton's been pitching very well. However, he is probably due for a little bit of regression. 4.05 FIP over a 2.48 ERA over the last 5 starts. If you look at the top last 20, the 4.18 FIP, he's pretty much been himself as far as pitching, but getting a little bit lucky. He has a 4.04 ERA over the last 20. He can strike guys out. He's not allowing many line drives. His fly ball rate is getting up there a little bit at 37.3%. Ton of ground balls at almost 46%. And that is going to be the key today. He is going to have to keep that ball on the ground. He knows it. The Braves know it. The pitching staff knows it. They're going to be trying to keep the ball down to limit these home runs. When you have this type of weather, this type of winds in Wrigley, there will be home runs. It's all about limiting guys on base when they happen. Now, that's the scary part for Morton. 4.9 walks per 9. If he's a little wild today, if he walks 2, 3, 4 batters, it could really, really spell trouble for him. And that's why I'm worried about going to Morton. I don't love the spot for Morton. However, 8.1K is pretty cheap, and he does have a good ceiling. If his stuff is on and he's forcing those ground balls, there's a path, even though we have great hitting weather here. So if they can, if they're teeing the ball up, Cubs are going to score a billion runs. If Morton's on his stuff, his location is good, and he's forcing ground balls or strikeouts, he's going to have a fine day, and the weather doesn't really matter. I do have to bring up the fact that he's not as good away, and this game is away. So this is a spot where I could see you having a little bit of Morton. I do think he's going over-owned. I got to say that in this spot. And then I obviously love the Cubs. I think the Cubs are going to be one of the higher-owned stacks as well as Atlanta. All right, next, Aaron Brooks. He's going way too high owned in my book. 6.4K, 1.6X. We just don't have much of a projection on him. His data from the minors isn't that great. He pitched okay versus Houston, going 7 innings, allowing 3 runs and 5 Ks, but I just don't think that's going to be the normal. However, this is a spectacular spot because the Colorado Rockies are terrible. They strike out 20% versus righties, but at least they have a decent average over the short term. And their K rate is 25% over the short term versus righties. I don't love it. It's a decent matchup, though, so if you really want to pay down and go to 6.4 to pay up for some bats, I get it. Next, Cal Quintrall. I like this spot for Oakland quite a bit. The one thing that worries me is Vegas seems to not love this spot. There's only a 7.5 over-under. Oakland's been hitting righties very well. However, I got to say that Oakland's sliding a little bit again. You know, they went on that hot streak, and now they've lost 7 or 8 straight, something like that. Quintrall keeps the ball down a lot, not allowing much hard contact. For Oakland to really get it, they're going to have to piece together some singles and doubles, whatnot. They're not going to probably be able to rely on the long ball, which that's kind of what they do. They have a 190 ISO versus righties. So they got to hit the ball hard to really score some runs. And that's one of the things Quintrall has been not really allowing. So I think Oakland's an interesting spot, but not quite as good as they were. Christian Javier, man, this Angels offense has been pesky, just kind of getting 2 teams. And 305 WOBA versus righties. That's also what their short-term opponent splits have been. The 150 games is 309, 160 ISO, 176 over the last 20 games versus righties. Now, Christian Javier, kind of a Jekyll and Hyde, absolutely gets crushed first Detroit, then comes out and slams Oakland. This Angels offense has been pesky. They keep doing work. Javier is pitching way better at home. I could see you go either side of this matchup. Also, 8.6K. We know if he has his stuff, he has that upside with strikeouts where he can get, 8, 9, 10 strikeouts, but his floor is through the floor and can give up 7 runs in 1.1 inning and just absolutely get crushed. So this is a spot that it's another one where I think you can play both sides of this game a little bit. And I don't mind either one. I think Javier should stay in your player pool. But he's a little risky. Next, Kyle Bradish. I actually really do like this spot for Kyle Bradish, and I think he's probably going a little under-owned here. We're talking about a guy that has a 2.74 FIP over the last 20 starts, 1.6 over the last 5. His K rate over the last 5 is 34%. K rate over the last 20 is 27.8. His StatCast data looks great. Cardinals, they've been hitting lately. Over the last 20 games versus righties, 285 average, 350 WOBA, 160 ISO, only a 24% K rate. But this Cardinals offense just isn't totally clicking. It's not one of the premier offenses in the league. And with this combined K rate at 29.2%, going unowned, 8.8K, we admit 2.2X, I think I am very, very intrigued with a way under-owned Kyle Bradish. I think Kikuchi and Bradish are two of my favorite plays on this slate. And I'm going to probably have a decent amount of both. Garrett Crochet is next. Look, Blue Jays hit righties very hard. Lefties very hard. And we know that. Along with that, Crochet is averaging 81.6% less fantasy points away. However, game total is only 7. I think this 81.6% less fantasy points while away is a little overblown. Yeah, he's probably worse away. A lot of pitchers are, but is it that dramatic? I don't know. My only worry is that he's 9.5K, but he has huge upside. 31% strikeout over the last 20, 34% over the last 5. I should say the last 20 is really only this year because they made him a starter this year. So what is it, like 10 games or so? But strikeout rate is there. He has some dominant stuff. If he can put it together, he becomes a little interesting. One thing that I do have to say, though, is I do worry about his pitch counts a little bit. He's only averaging 87 per start over the last 5. Don't love that. I'm intrigued by him. Definitely not going to have much because it's very, very risky, but I'm intrigued. Brandon Pfaff's another spot that I'm intrigued. I think he is pitching extremely well. 2.89 FIP over the last 5. 3.74 over the last 20. 25% K rate. 23% K rate over the last 5. But it's versus Dodger offense. Literally nobody's going to be here. He's only 7.1K. We've seen him have an upside. I'm intrigued. I don't love the spot because it's this Dodgers team. But pitching's rough today. And Pfaff is going to stay in my pool even against the Dodgers. I think people are sleeping on his ability. He was a big-time prospect, and he's kind of showing it a little bit this year. 2.89 FIP over his last 5 is very, very good. He showed up at the end of the year. He definitely has the ceiling that makes me want to consider him at 7.1K. You can go Garrett Stone. I don't love him. I just got to show you one thing. His FIP is 4.7. His ERA is 1.84 over the last 5. If you go, to the last 20 starts, 5.16 ERA and 4.96 FIP. I just don't think he's that good. He keeps getting it done, but I think he's been getting very, very lucky. So I don't love this spot. I'm sure some people will talk him up today, but it won't be me. Only other person I want to talk up is Griffin Canning. Talked about him versus St. Louis last game and at 5.5K. If you want to pay down, I think he's absolutely one you can. You're talking about a guy that has, a low-ish 4 FIP, 23% K rate. However, his K rate, last year was like 25%. So the K rate has came down a little bit this year. In the short term, it's only 16%. He's definitely not missing as many bats as you can. He doesn't have huge upside in this spot where we only have a 17% K rate. But hey, he's 5.5K, could absolutely go 6+ innings and get you 4 or 5 Ks. And we've seen this Houston offense, however, they are hitting a little bit right now. We've seen them not be that great so far this season. They have a decent ISO, decent WOBA, but it's not anything game-breaking. And BVP data is a little scary. It is absolutely a spot I don't mind having some Houston stacks and a very little bit of Canning. It's a risky play, but hey, super cheap. So let's get over to FanDuel now. Our high-owned pitchers on FanDuel. We got Clark Schmidt once again, 32%. I like him. Don't love him. Kikuchi, I prefer. LineStar prefers also. only 600 more and you get 2 more fantasy points. I'm in. Aaron Brooks popping up a little bit. No way I'm touching him on FanDuel where it's only 1 pitcher and he's almost 20%. Christian Javier is interesting, as I said. Definitely willing to have a little bit of him. Morton is there. Bradish, I'm very intrigued at going unowned at 9.1K. We didn't talk about Javier Assad, and we probably should because this is a game that we are likely to target quite a bit here. So, Atlanta's not hitting the ball great right now. 22% K rate versus righties. They have a decent WOBA, decent ISO. Over the short term versus righties, they've been bad. 215 average. 1.117 ISO. 26% K rate. They've been terrible over the short term. However, I got to bring up the fact that it's very nice, very warm winds. Winds are blowing out. Warm weather, the ball's going to fly. However, Assad keeps the ball down. Almost 55% ground balls, 32% fly balls. The balls that get up in the air are very realistically probably going out today. This park just loves the wind. So I think Assad is pitching better than he really is. 2.24 ERA over his last 20 starts over a 3.59 FIP. He has definitely been getting lucky. There's going to be some regression. We saw it last year where some games he just got, kind of smoked. This is a game that he absolutely could get kind of smoked. He just faced Atlanta and went 6 innings, 7 Ks, no earned run in Atlanta. I don't see that happening again in this spot. I don't love Assad. I think the Angels and the Cubs are clearly the better stacks on this team. However, I do got to bring up, for both of them, both pitchers are ground ball pitchers. If they're keeping the ball down today, it's going to be hard for either offense to really get it going and take advantage of that weather. Now let's get into some stacks. And check it out. I'll bring up the fact that, when you're making up those lineups, if you want to fade some of the ownership from the Cubs and Braves, having one of Assad or Morton as your pitcher is going to be super leveraged spot, and then just stack other teams. All right, so highest FIP over the last 20, Lance Lynn, 5.72 versus Baltimore. Look, Lynn, I do think, is due for some positive regression. His ERA has been much higher than his FIP over the short term, 5.84 over 4.14. Now, he's just not that great of a pitcher anymore. So, Baltimore being a great offense, Gunnar Henderson is on absolute tear. I think that you could absolutely stack Baltimore, and I think they're in an interesting spot. Don't mind getting some. Now, if we go to the highest ownership, it's got to be Atlanta and the Cubs popping up on this situation. Oh, wow. Detroit. I don't think this stays. I think it is going to clearly be Atlanta and Cubs. Alec Marsh, yeah, you can absolutely pick on him. I don't mind picking on him, but I do not think this stays. I think that the Cubs and the Braves end up much, much higher owned. Baltimore's popping up a little bit, as well as Atlanta. Detroit, I think you can stack them, but if they're almost 80% owned on this slate, I'm probably not going to have very much. Highest projection for the stack attacks happens to be Atlanta and the Dodgers. I think Atlanta and the Cubs are the clear best stacks for the day. With that game total so high, it's minus 101, so, Vegas is saying it's an absolute pick'em. Atlanta is just a slight favorite. I think Atlanta makes a lot of sense. Saad's been getting lucky. It just comes down to, is that ground ball happening or not for either of the pitchers? Dodgers versus Brand Paft. I've said I think Brand Paft is a very good pitcher, and he's not getting the credit that he deserves. With that being said, we've seen him give up 6 or 7 runs and multiple home runs, and if anybody can do it, it is the Dodgers. They're absolutely always in play. Houston's popping up versus Griffin Canning. As I said, I can play that one on absolutely either side, and I'm fine with it. Top value play, with Detroit popping up as ownership, I would expect them to pop up as a value play here, and they aren't. Colorado is versus Aaron Brooks. I actually very much do like that spot. Aaron Brooks, I think, is not that great of a pitcher, and he still has a 5.39 FIP over his last 5, and I would absolutely pick on that at very low ownership. If this game was in Colorado, everybody would be on it probably. And Angels versus Javier is popping up a little bit. I'm intrigued on that. Seattle versus Clark Schmidt. Again, I said it's a total leverage spot. Clark Schmidt is due for a little bit of regression. Don't mind going with a leverage stack there. And then highest ceiling on the day. Yankees versus Brian Wu. Brian Wu is a decent pitcher. However, 4.98 FIP over his last 5. FIP of 4 over his last 20. That ERA is down. Maybe due for some regression. Yankees are hitting well. You have to always consider the Yankees when they're hitting like this. They're definitely hitting the ball well. Now, let's go to the teams. So, Cubs and Braves both at 5.8 implied total. I think that's where the 2 higher ownerships are going to go. I do have to say Atlanta's bullpen is a little bit better than Chicago's. Assad is maybe a little bit better of a pitcher than Morton, though. So it's a, give or take. Both teams, I think, are fairly interesting in this. You just don't get, winds and weather like this that often in Chicago, and you got to kind of take advantage of it when it happens. Houston coming in at 5 implied total. Griffin Canning giving up hard contact. Angels bullpen isn't good. Absolutely intriguing. Baltimore at 4.9. Lance Lynn just isn't what he used to be. The bullpen behind him is meh. Detroit 4.8. Alec Marsh, bullpen behind him isn't great. You can pick on him. KC just keeps hitting the ball very well. Casey Mize has been decent. 3.9 FIP, 4.37 over the last 20. I don't love picking on Mize, but you could do much worse. Dodgers at 4.7 versus Paft. He gives up hard contact. The bullpen behind him isn't great. If he doesn't have a good day, Dodgers definitely could have, or probably will have, a great day. Oakland versus Quantrill. High average exit velocity. Bullpen's bad, so definitely intriguing to go there. And I don't really love the stacks behind him. However, you got to bring up Seattle with Clark Schmidt. Just due to the fact that, there's big time leverage there. But New York's bullpen is pretty solid. So that'll do it for us today. I think it's a really interesting slate. Atlanta and the Cubs are likely to be super high owned. Houston probably go a little under owned because of the ownership to these guys. And Baltimore is a pretty interesting one as well. So that'll do it for us today, guys. Good luck. Let's win some money. Peace.